Well, hi, everybody. I'm really happy today to introduce Daniel Alexander Jones. I'm so excited to speak with him today. He is an actor, a singer, a writer, a all around creative person. And so I'm very happy that he's come to be on Sebron
Wow.
to talk with us today about the arts. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, it's so good to be with you here, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about yourself, because a lot of times we kind of operate within our in our spheres,
Hmm.
and although
Hmm.
my viewing public isn't huge, but it is very
Yeah,
diverse. So give me a little background. Where are you from? What were some of your early creative ventures?
I love it. So yeah, I was born and raised in Springfield, Massachusetts. So for those who may not know, it's a working class town in western part of Massachusetts, and I always say I'm from Springfield, but I'm from Springfield in the 1970s, because I
Now,
was
what does
born
that mean?
into, that means to me that I came up at a very particular time. So my parents and the community I grew up in, had just come through the civil rights movement, and they were the kind of community that you hear about that almost seems like it's mythic. Everybody knew everybody on the street. Everybody looked out for each other's kids, and there was this deep sense of everybody working toward that idea of what my parents would always call brotherhood. Like you do your best to be good neighbors, to be good people with each other. You're not going to love everybody, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but you still do the work of building community and staying in connection. So I say I come from then because I think it says something about my value system, is that I grew up always thinking not only about what I wanted to do, but what do we want to do? Like how does what I do connect to the community and vice versa? Um, and I would say that, I grew up in a very loving on a very loving street, with a lot of characters. Like I can go back and think of all the people, and there were maybe two defining factors to my upbringing. Number one, that my father's side of the family all came from South Carolina, so they
Okay.
were they were like Great Migration uh, kids.
Mm-hmm.
So half of his siblings were born in Massachusetts, but the older ones had been born in South Carolina, and so and they
So
came.
wait a
Yeah,
minute.
yeah, yeah.
So cornbread,
Yes.
savory or sugar?
Now, see, here's where my other thing comes, because I also have that New England Yankee thing. So I've got the sweet cornbread from them
No,
and the
no.
savory cornbread from my grandmother, Daisy May. Right? She couldn't never was and it was thin and savory, and then the one in New England was fat and sweet. So
Like cake. That's
like
cake.
cake.
That's not
That's cake.
cornbread.
That's
What are
not
you talking
cornbread.
about? I have a
I love
cast
it.
iron skillet right in here. I'm gonna send you a picture later on
Beautiful.
of the cornbread.
I want
Anyway,
I
I'm
want
sorry,
that picture. Don't be sorry. No, I'm a
but I
cornbread fiend.
but
I'm
I
not supposed to eat it,
diverse.
but no, you do not. You do not. But I feel like that's actually the perfect image for me. It's like I had all of these different styles of being in the world
Uh-huh.
because there were so many different styles and ways together. So we had that. We also had, like, the other side of my family is like old white Yankee New England, like old. They were there since old 1600s, and farm people though. So I didn't come from money. I came from workers, right?
Uh-huh.
And then on that street were also like folks from the Caribbean, folks from immigrants from Europe, Italy, and Poland, and so it was
What an
people real
eclectic
salt of the
mix
earth.
to stimulate your creative process, right?
Completely. And so part of it was I heard all these different languages. I heard all this different music. So across the street was an old Italian lady, and she used to play Caruso on her 78, and you would hear that coming out of her house. And then
Oh.
next door to her was my best friend growing up. He was the son of the preacher. Well, there were two preachers on our street. There was
Mm-hmm.
the Trinity Baptist, and so he was the son of Reverend Morgan. And so they would always, and he was a gospel singer, my friend. And so that music was always pouring out of that house. And then my father went to the AME church, and that was two doors down. That reverend, and they, they're more like this. So they didn't make sound that way, but the finery and the kind of the pageantry of going to that world. So all that to say, I could go to almost any house on that street and experience a different cultural feel.
What a
So
beautiful environment to grow up in.
it was amazing. So I
Yeah.
always felt like all of it is all around us, all of it's accessible. And probably the most important thing for me growing up was I felt that it all lived inside of what I considered to be Blackness because it was held by Black culture. That was the container for everything. And so I didn't ever come up with the sense that being in a deep relationship to Blackness culturally was a limitation. I always thought of it as infinity. So you could go anywhere, you could do anything, you could be connected to anybody, but connected through the root of those cultural traditions.
That's a
So
beautiful
yeah.
freedom to have as a child where,
Ooh, it was amazing.
yeah, yeah. And then, so then you went into Africana studies. I checked your
Yes.
Wikipedia page.
I did.
Um,
Yeah, I did. But I got there through a side door because I had gone to be an actor. I went to I went through high school, public high school. We had arts in the public schools. So I got to be in the theater program. I was a very shy kid who kind of came out into the world through theater like many artists do, finding
yes.
your singing voice or finding your dance or whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go to college to be an actor. And so I applied to a bunch of schools, didn't really have that background of knowing how to do that. I just
Wait a minute.
did it.
That's their loss.
No, wait, wait. Oh my God.
And then now they go like, oh, didn't we have him? It's like Juilliard tries to claim Eric LaSalle. And, they have
Oh,
this program where after 2 years they ask you. So now they say, oh, he attended. Well, sorry, he went on to NYU. Duh.
boom. That's it. It's real though. It's
I'm
real.
sorry.
No, don't be sorry. But that's what happened to me was I encountered racism and homophobia in that department. So much so that the head of the acting program at the time told me you should find another major because we'll never cast you in a leading role, quote. And this was in the late 80s. And I remember feeling that, and many of us have stories like that where we get that blow from the outside world. But again, I was lucky that I knew who I was and that I had come from a context where I could have a read on that, right?
And that was going to be my question because I didn't do like deep dive into your personal life,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
but I do know that you have worked with the LB. Help me.
Yeah.
I don't say it often.
LGBTQ plus. Yeah.
LGBTQ,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
work and theater and whatnot.
Yeah.
When you went to college, did you have a strong sense of self in terms of, because you say the homophobia, was that
Yeah.
like a really bad challenge to you, or you was like, well, hey, I know who I am. I'll see you later.
Yeah. I think the place where I know who I am, I'll see you later was around my cultural identity of Blackness. Like I was clear. So I got to, what ended up happening is I met a professor who taught a course in African American drama. And I took her class and she saw me. She saw through me.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I've got you. If you come work with me in Africana Studies,
Yeah.
I will single-handedly teach you everything you need to know to get you prepared to go on to further study and your career. And she did.
Oh my
So I
gosh, I'm
had,
getting chills.
yeah, it was amazing. She was one of two, and I'm going to speak when we get to talking about mentors. I'll talk about another person
Mm-hmm.
too. But I think I had that place, and maybe it was a little bit of an arrogance to say like, I'm not I'm not I'm not thirsty for acceptance into a culture that would keep me out. Like I don't want that. And I found a way. But with regard to my identity in terms of my sexuality or gender identity, I think I was figuring things out. And so it
Mm-hmm.
was still at a time where there were real rigid ideas about what was man and what was woman, what was straight, what was gay, what was lesbian. Like it was a lot more rigid than now in today's world, where I feel like young people especially have just made more room for you to just be, be who you are and name what you need to name. So it was a struggle, And it was a struggle because honestly, I always was thinking politically, like what do I do as a person, as an artist? What is the impact of that? Again, thinking about other people, like what's it going to impact? And I remember at the time feeling like the most important thing I had on my plate was to go through that experience of school and to come out with an achievement that was an expression of what I came to do. Like
Mm-hmm.
I came to be an artist, I came to be a theater artist, and it is 30 years to the day that I started work on what would be my first, like my thesis production at Vassar.
Uh-huh.
That was the first play that I wrote, directed, performed in with other people, did music, all the stuff, and it 30 years ago. And so I've done it ever since. So I felt like I left bruised but victorious from that experience.
Well, I think sometimes those bruises give us the impetus to go on because they're
Mm.
not really bruises, they're pushes.
Ooh,
Because
I love that.
those people behind us were not for us. We don't have to prove anything to them, right? We just say, eat
No,
my
man.
dust, baby. Eat my
That's
dust.
right.
You know?
That's right.
Uh,
That's
I'm
right.
sorry.
No, it's
I'm
true
in a
though.
strange mood today. But, you know, I think the thing is, too, is that, you know, for, especially as young artists, um, I'll share something with you off camera when we're
Please.
done.
Okay. Okay.
But the thing is that as we learn about ourselves and what our capabilities are, the people who tell us no are actually making us explore more if we have that sense of self, you
That's
know?
beautiful.
Because
Yeah.
if you had allowed them to crush you, you'd probably be in Massachusetts right now, maybe working in an
Exactly.
office somewhere, you know.
Exactly right.
But to write music, to write literature, you know, you've written a couple of books. Let's talk about your creative process right now, because
Awesome.
you know, we could go down that road and I would just be asking you questions for my own benefit because I learn things
Come
from
on.
people.
Yeah, right.
But
Love it.
tell me about your creative process and how you sit down, like when you get an idea and then,
Mhm.
okay, I'm going to take it in this direction or that direction.
Beautiful. So more often than not, I start with a question. Something bothers me in the world, or something gets in my spirit, and
Mm-hmm.
it keeps showing up. So like the question can be, you know, like with Blacklight that you saw, like what are we going to choose as a nation? Like what are we going to choose? At the time that I was working on that show, that was the biggest question that I have. Another question might be, how do you deal with the silence in our history, right? I wrote two pieces based on, for example, my family history, that, like a lot of people, when they got north, they didn't talk about what they left behind. And that was because they left because of lynching. They left behind, like some really difficult stories about what they had to do to make it through.
Yeah.
And they wanted the emphasis to be on the future, on possibility, on like, this is what we're going to go forward to. But as an artist, I'd be like, but what was that story? Like, what happened? How do I link this back to that, to that, to that thing? And I'm a little, like as I've gotten older, it's gotten stronger, but I've always been at least intuitive and maybe a little bit psychic, as I've gotten older. And so I speak very openly about the fact that I hear messages. I get, like, they come to me in dreams, they bother me, and they'll
No,
cut,
I understand. I
all
understand
right,
exactly what you're saying.
good,
Because
good.
people are like, oh, that's kind of weird. You kind of
Yeah.
out there. Well, you know,
Well,
spirit speaks
that's
to me.
it's same here. And at this
Mm-hmm.
point in my life, I'm like, yeah, I am weird and I'm out there. And here, come over here and learn what I what I've been told, Um, but so I say that to say that it's usually something that's like this. And I think of it like that, the image of the oyster and the pearl, because it
Mm-hmm.
bothers me. And then I go and I read, or I go listen to music, or I go talk to people, or I go to the library when you can go to the library. I go research, and gradually stuff starts to come together into this, like a palette of things to choose from.
Yes.
And then I will get guided. And I think it's a combination of my own experience, my own intellect being like, okay, I know how to make a thing. So I know there are certain things that you have to put in place and put in motion. But then there's also a part that does feel like it's spirit. And spirit will say to me, This time, I think you should write the language and that you should find somebody else to work on the music. And I think you need to find four performers. And I think, and so it's like it starts to assemble a crew of people.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
again, I always think collaboratively. And I bring that group together. And usually it takes a year or two to go from that troubled question to building the piece. And I'm a little bit old school in the sense that I'm a little all hands on deck, where it's like you get in the kitchen creatively and I may be writing, but then there comes a thing where I'm like, oh, but I see some movement. So I'll offer that to the room. Or
Mm-hmm.
somebody
Mm-hmm.
who's in the room who may be playing music may say, you know what? That scene is boring. And I'll be like, okay, you're giving me dramaturgical information. So I'll take your wisdom and I'll weave it here. So I always also leave a little room, and I'm different that way and than a lot of artists. Like I don't feel like I need to be the sole author of the work. I feel like the collective comes together and there's brilliance in that room. And I try to do the best I can, with all the legalities of who has a right, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in the room, I really believe that the people who are in that room are tuned in and responsible for birthing this thing into the world, and that you're going to get wisdom from everybody there. Everybody there.
Well, if you go back to like Mozart and Da Ponte, they were writing
Mm.
each other back and forth, or Hammerstein, and I forget who the other person is. There was absolutely this collaborative work that was going on. And I have seen one of your shows, which so impressed me so much.
Oh, thank
Uh, Joe Mama Jones, though.
Yes, right.
I don't
Yeah.
want to talk to Joe Mama
I know
today,
what,
though.
yeah, but it
Yeah,
wasn't, yeah.
yeah. But I think the
Yeah.
thing too is that when we're in that flow, when we have the environment around us that's very positive,
Hmm.
it's easier for that flow to happen.
Yes.
When you have met obstacles, how have you handled those along the way? You know, because I
I,
think
mhm.
there's value in people hearing that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I will say it's an interesting connection.
Mm-hmm.
The same way I talk about collaboration creatively, I think of life as a collaboration. And the way that I've gotten through obstacles is by the fact that I'm in connection and community with other people who've helped me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certainly that, I saw the trailer for the new Tina Turner documentary, and there's that moment where she says, like, like I pulled myself up. Like she's like, I was able to go in and dig down and say, I'm gonna change my life. And
Mm-hmm.
that grit, that ability to do on your own, that kind of digging down and like, oh, the people would say, put your shoulder to the wheel.
Yes.
That thing is real. And I've
Yes.
had to do that. Like there have been many dark nights of the soul where, I've been, like I've lost something, or I've failed at something, or I've been told no for the 500th time, or I'm not satisfied with something in life,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm in grief, and you have to go in and you have to find that. But I really believe that we're meant to be in life together. And so the way that I got through was that I had incredible mentors. I had incredible community that was like friends that I invested in and they invested in me.
Mm-hmm.
I have many, not all, but many of my friendships are 25, 30-year-old friendships. We've been, we go on the journey together. So I've been able to say, I'm thinking about one of the spirituals I heard you sing, that one of my great mentors used to sing and teach me. I'm troubled, and I'm thinking about that. I'm troubled in mind. If you are troubled in mind, what do you
Mm-hmm.
do? So there is prayer, there's meditation, there's
Mm-hmm.
inner work, but there's also the thing of you got to have your people to go to and say, oh, and they help you.
That's what I call my committee,
That's
and
right.
sometimes the members of your committee change, but these are people
Yes,
that you have absolute trust in,
absolutely.
and you know that your whatever you intimate to them, it stays in that place, and those are few and far between.
Indeed.
But the ones that you have, they're like gold,
Ooh, like gold, like gold.
Mm-hmm.
So I
So
think that's a big part of it. I ask for help. and I
And
it's
that's and
hard.
that's and that's a part of resilience, is it not? Especially
Yes.
as an artist, because you're going to run into a lot of no's,
Yeah.
and waiting for that, not waiting, but working for that yes.
Yeah.
So you mentioned one of your mentors, but you didn't
Yeah.
mention the name. So we want to give honor to our
Oh,
to our
please.
people.
Yes.
So
Yes, yes.
the
I'm a big name caller. So the mentor I was speaking of who really helped me make my path, her name was Dr. Constance Berkeley, and she was of that old school Washington D.C. tribe, like went to the Dunbar High School and Howard University and Columbia. Like she was very much that old, like she could give you the look over her glasses and done, and everything was this pulled up. But the other mentor I wanted to mention to you is the one who taught me that spiritual, but who also comes to mind in our conversation.
Mhm.
And her name was Dr. Blanche Foreman. And
You knew Blanche?
oh God, she was one of my great teachers.
Oh my gosh. I met Blanche right before she moved out of New York. And I forget
Wow.
where she was going. And then, not too long after that, she
She
left us.
passed. Yes.
But oh my
Oh,
gosh.
wow. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What a
Yeah.
circle. We
Yeah.
have a circle here. A
It's a
wonderful
it's a huge
singer.
it's a huge circle. Yeah, and a truly she had one of the most gentle and true hearts of anybody I knew. And
Mm-hmm.
she had steel in her. So she had both things.
Yes.
Um, but I bring her up because I want to just give one image to you. I met her around the same time as I met Dr. Berkeley, and I took her class in Black music, and it was like old home, for all. And the thing was, every Black student took that class. It didn't matter if they were an engineer, a biologist. Everybody was in that class together, because it was a place where we could, there's a part of it where we could be together in a
Mm-hmm.
space that was held as being ours.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember going to her office I took voice lessons from her. And like so many of those incredible teachers, she did it out of the kindness of her heart because I didn't have money to pay her. I wasn't officially enrolled. She's like, just come here. And
Yeah.
I did some stuff, like I'd go run errands for her or whatever. But you would go in that office, and it was a corner office in this Gothic building at Vassar, the music building.
Yes.
And there would never be less than 7 or 10 students in there, on the reading on the corner, laying on the carpet, sitting up next to her. And she held court, and she taught us, but she also held us. And she made a space for us to come and to tell what was on our hearts. And she could switch. I write about her in my forthcoming memoir. And I said, my thing about her was she could sing German Lieder, as you know, like she could sing it within an inch of its life, like float those notes and bring that pathos and bring that like you could see her seeing out into the universe
Mm-hmm.
and do it and do it better than anybody. And then she could also sing the spirituals and bring it from such a real place. So it wasn't ever put on. It was coming from, it would give you chills every time. And then
Yes.
she also celebrated the work of Black art composers. So she would like lift up Charles Lloyd and lift up, like, I'm thinking of all the people whose music she would teach us. So she said, again, everything is yours. You can do all of it, and you should expect that you can do all of it.
Yes. Yes. I'm just, I didn't know her well. We had a mutual friend, Raymond Bazemore,
Oh, I
and
love it.
that's how I met her. And that's how I actually became introduced to the songs of Charles Lloyd.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, wow, that's a circle.
It's so beautiful. That's
Ah,
good.
my goodness. Well, to the ancestors. I
Indeed.
mean, Blanche
Indeed.
was one of a kind, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your acting
Yeah.
and you can't separate them. You're acting, you're writing, you're singing. So now I know who your singing teacher
Yeah,
was. And
right.
you have a and people he has a great singing voice,
Oh,
you
thank you
know.
so much.
And I'm going to have to get some
Yeah.
albums. I have to confess.
I'll send you. I'll send you.
Now
I'll send
I want to contribute to the
you. Okay.
fund. So when I
Thank you.
have I will contribute to the fund. But you know, because we have to support each other. The friends and family discount only goes so far. I'm
It's
sorry,
all good. No, it's
I'm
good.
being
It's real
silly.
though. No, you're being
Oh
real.
God.
You're being real.
So in
Yes.
terms of the acting, like you write your own things.
Yeah.
Have you done the other, pieces and August Wilson and all this kind of
Oh
stuff as
yeah.
well?
I actually did an August Wilson in grad school. We were all way too young to be doing it, but we did it anyway. We did the piano lesson, and I played
Oh.
Doker. I did.
Mm.
I showed, and I remember ironing all them clothes. It was fun. But I started out that way, like, with the idea of going and being in shows, and I was in a number of plays. But I think I just, at some point, I was like, oh, there are stories here that I want to see. And it, like Toni Morrison talked about, if you want to see it, it's not there. You got to go write it. You have to go bring it into the world. So my mind flipped there. But I've done a lot of voice acting, actually. Like I've done a lot, like reading like at selected shorts in New York City, and
Yes.
doing things that are about reading literature aloud. Like that's been a lot of what when it's not my work, probably in my mid 30s through my 40s, like when I would do acting work, it would be about like doing some kind of reading for somebody else's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've always, it's interesting. People have always reflected back to me. They're like, your voice is the thing. And it's like, whether you're, singing or not, but it's like even the way I speak, people are like, oh, we like to hear you talk. And so I look back now and I don't think of it that much, but like I look back and I'm like, oh, I think that's a common thread, that using language and using the voice to bring language up in a room has been where I tend to get cast, or where I tend to get called in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we want you to read this, so that's versus acting, acting the show.
But when it comes to acting, you've done your own thing, which I think is actually much more satisfying in a certain
Yeah.
way because you get to tell the stories that you want to tell,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so just talk about some of these 16 productions, if
Oh,
you would.
60, yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, it's been a lot. I have to say, it's like, it's only recently I've looked back and I'm like, because I've been such a workaholic. Like, I think work was just my thing. And as I told you, kind of like my mission, like I'm going to go out
Mm.
here. And I look back and I was like, no wonder you're tired. You know what I mean? Like, you've been doing all these things.
Well, what's
And
your favorite one? What's the
my,
one that was
oh
like the
God.
child that you just
Ah.
had to give birth to?
Oh, I kind of feel that way about all of them. I always say that, but I will say that it's been meaningful that Blacklight, which is the piece you saw, I think has reached the most varied audience. And I
Mm-hmm.
say that not because I think that means it's the thing I love the most because it reached the most people, but I feel like the thing I love about that show is I hear back from people, total strangers, even today, who write me and tell me about something that it gave to them. And that is why I do it. Like it's like one person wrote me and said, she we did the show in Seattle, and she wrote and she said, uh, as a black woman in Seattle, she said, I have rarely the occasion of being in a space publicly where my stories are in the middle, and where
Mm-hmm.
where where the images that I know from my life are held up as being the special images. And so she said, it took me out to see stories that reminded me of my aunts and my grandmother, and that experience. And so it's that for me, like, and I feel that same way about the work that I've done, where I put on stage, you know young queer kids, or I put on stage, you know people who are, like a multiracial community that actually is working to be together and not kill each other. I try to put that in our imagination, because I think if you can imagine it, you can be it.
but also it's a reflection of reality in so many ways.
Yeah.
The community that you described, young kids who are discovering and finding themselves, and some of the conflict that they go through
Yeah.
as they're trying to just understand, who am I, you know?
Yeah.
And it's so important that those stories get told in a way that speaks to everyone.
Yeah.
When I was sitting there in your show down in the village, and I just started crying because it
Oh,
reminded me of those moments, like those hot summer nights, in August. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, so
I
August
love
is
it.
like steamy. I
Oh,
mean,
it's crazy out
100%
there.
humidity. And I just remember sitting on the porch, and those kinds of stories. And then, the very real issues sometimes around racism, and issues around sexuality, and those are things that, we need to talk about
Yes.
in a way, I think, that shows each other's openness and sensitivity to those
Yes.
stories.
Yes.
Because it's like, no, no, I'm a Baptist, I can't do. No, well, honey, look at your cousin over there, that kind of thing.
It's true. And hopefully, this thing that one of the things I remember so vividly about my mom and my dad,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we lost my mom in November, and so it's
Oh
it's
dear.
been she's very much on my heart and in my that movement of everything.
So
But
sorry, that's a
thank
hard
you.
one.
It's
That's a hard
it's
one.
it's it's brutal, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
like it's so holy. I say it's the hardest thing and the holiest thing I've ever been involved in is this shift.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think back to the two of them, and I'll tell you a true thing. Many Saturday mornings I would wake up, and that Saturday was also the day my father would clean the house. Like he would do it his way, and he'd get the pine saw, and I always smell that. And that would wake you up, and he would also cook the dishes he liked to cook weekly. So he would make greens with he start with the pig's knuckles and make greens, and he'd make sometimes fried fish, and he would my grandmother would send over the cornbread savory, right? But there was always food cooking. There was that sense of the space being cleared and cleaned,
Mm-hmm.
and invariably, somebody would be downstairs in the kitchen with them. I would hear the voices. So sometimes it would be my uncle. Sometimes it would be a neighbor. Sometimes it would be, we used to have a milkman that back in the day, right? And the milkman would take his break and come to my parents' house to sit down, get a cup of coffee, kick back, and tell stories. But I remember the feeling that it was a place that people wanted to come to because they knew that when they shared what was going on with them, sometimes it would be a funny story, but many times it was like they were going through a hard time in their marriage, or they were having a crisis of faith, or they were having, just those grown folks business things that like little kids have no business listening to, but we're
You're
like,
sitting on the steps.
it's
Listen,
right.
I know, I
I
know.
was sitting on those steps, and I remember that what hit me, and I can feel it in my body right now, is
Mm-hmm.
when you make a space where people are loved and respected, and they know that what they're sharing with you is going to be held with regard and tenderness and care.
Yes.
Healing can happen. Actual healing can happen. And I saw my parents, because we didn't have, back in the day, you didn't have, unless you were in a very particular zone, you didn't have therapy. And especially the people, working people didn't go to therapy, you
You
talk to
better
your
you better
people.
pray it out.
You better pray it out. But my parents were unofficial therapists for
Mm-hmm.
for their community. And
Mm-hmm.
I think back to that. So it's in that spirit when you talk about like we want to put the work out in the world as art that is done in a way that we can hear each other and reach each other. I always start from that place of like, I want, when you come in to see a show of mine, I want you to feel as welcome and as respected as the people who would come to my parents' kitchen
Mm-hmm.
table.
So let's because every time I get into a conversation with somebody, there's so many questions that I
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
but I got an hour
I know.
basically.
Okay, so here we go.
Let me
And I
and
will talk too. I'm a
well,
talker.
so will I, because our best conversation is gonna be when we're off the mic.
No, that's right.
But
That's right.
in the time of like BML, Black Lives
Hmm.
Matters, and the pandemic, and these last few years that we've lived through, uh, nationally and internationally, where is the artist centered in all of that?
Right.
What would
Mhm.
you say is our mission or our goal, or do we go into our shell? I mean, because some people it's like I don't want to deal with that,
Right.
and
Right.
and I'm conflicted, I have to say, because a lot of the kids, when I say kids, I'm talking about
Hmm.
40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, they're very like, well, this organization is racist and we need to do this and we need to do that, and um I just don't know, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. There are a few things that come up for me. Number one is like I've been really attentive to this moment, and I think about the Me Too movement,
Mm-hmm.
and how that really the upswell of that over the last several years finally, like I'm obviously, Tarana Burke being the one who originated that language long ago, and then like it slowly moves through community activism, and then over time it gets enough of a thing in it that it becomes a consciousness that people are sharing. And so like Me Too, like Black Lives Matter, like this moment of reckoning around like systemic institutional abuse.
Daniel, let me pause for just a
Okay,
second.
sure.
The man outside is doing the recycling.
Oh, got it. And we
Okay,
got
hold on. I'm just gonna shut the
okay.
window. Yeah. All
Okay.
right. Let's
But
get
I
back.
would just say that, it's been a really powerful time where at least in my lifetime, of being in connection with the arts, and especially around Black white issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big moment of reckoning. It's like it's a big moment where finally there's an opportunity to change some of the practices that have historically just been inflexible. So I do think that that's a real deal, but I'm more interested in what are we doing as artists, not to only fight the institutions that exist right now, to fight the ways that things are being done now and have been done historically, but I think the true role of the artist is to dream our future into being, to imagine how we can be the most generative, positive, and I want to come back to that word healing. The earth
Mm-hmm.
needs healing. We need healing. Artists can do that work because artists can show us, how many stories do we know of the person who has had their heart broken, and it's through the story that they realize that they have been afraid to touch that pain, and then in the story they are brought into the presence of people who help them to open their heart again, and then they get transformed, and then they become the one that is the agent of love in the world. that
Yes.
that story helps me in those moments to be like, I'm in pain. How do I get to the next?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Art is the way. It's listening to an aria that brings you through the dark night into the dawn. It's seeing a dance performance where you see somebody defy gravity and like break open a whole new way of being in the body. That's our work. And I would say for myself, I don't want to get caught up in tussling with some old dead structure. I'm just like, let's go to the new and
And
follow
that's
me
the
there.
question. What is the new? Like
Hmm.
in opera, do we keep doing Butterfly, Aida, and Porgy and Bess?
Right.
I mean, we can still do those things, but I've been telling people, anyone that will listen, I'm ready for the opera that's going to replace Porgy and Bess. Can somebody please do a comedy? We're all, because you're always, it's about this person got killed or that person got lynched and stuff. We need laughter, you know,
Mm.
and it may seem kind of superficial,
Mm-mm.
but in terms of the spirit, that you are fed by tragedy, you learn from that, but you're also fed by laughter and joy. And
Absolutely.
as creative people,
Yeah.
what can we do to get these small companies where they can have high level artists coming in and doing the work, and
Yeah.
they'll take a risk on somebody doing an experimental piece, and
Yeah.
then maybe later on it goes to Broadway or the public
Yeah.
theater, you know.
But I
So
think you got it is risk taking. It's really that. And it's like, and I think not only about the institutions taking the risks or the companies taking the risks, but I think
mhm,
we as artists have to take the risk. And part of what's happening right now, and I know it is brutal. It is brutal. What they said, 75% of the arts jobs are gone nationally, gone, and not likely to come back in the way that they were. And like like to get that, like to sit with all of that is so big.
yeah,
But there's also, to me, I go back and I think about we have so many ancestors who figured out how to take nothing and turn it into gold. And so it's like, well, what are you going to do? And I like all these brilliant singers. I'm like, okay. You know, I think about, for example, one artist who I really admire. Do you know Toshi Regan and her work?
I've heard her perform. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's one thing that she did that I thought was super like prescient about this time, when she adapted Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower into a kind of opera piece.
Wow, I'm gonna have to
And
look for that.
she it's really worth checking out. And one of the things I love that she did was, she's like, you know, she took her concern, she took her political agency, she took her history, you know, with her brilliant lineage from her mom, and she was like, all right, you know what? We're going to get together and we're going to talk about this crisis from the perspective of the future. Like, well, let's go to the future. So she did this science fiction novelist brilliant thing and adapted it, but she didn't wait around. And it started, to my understanding, and I don't want to say a false thing here,
Hmm.
but they started, you know, in a circle in chairs, learning and singing and making together over a couple years, and then it showed in like a festival where it was people, musicians and singers sitting in chairs, and then it grew into the theatrical presentation that had the
Yeah.
thing. But she didn't wait, she started. And I think that's what I say to all of the artists right now. Don't wait don't wait for it to go back. Don't wait for it to be again. Start now. And if that means you have never recorded yourself, go figure it out. Everybody can do it now. You can do it on a phone. If it means you've never written a song, why not try one? You
Hmm.
listen to, Dr. Foreman, Blanche Foreman said to me one time, because I'm not a reader, I'm not a music reader. And I one time came to her and she said, you know music. She's like, how many songs have you listened to in your life? And I was like, oh, she said, you know music. Be done with it. Like, now come over here, you know? And so that sense of, yes, you ultimately would love to have a show on, you know, on TV, or a show running for a long time, or have your album sell however many things. But if you sit down and you wait, do something.
Hmm.
And the last thing I would say is, the idea you work through right now will not be your last idea. So don't feel like you have to hold all the goodies until the right moment. No, you're going to have more songs. You're going to sing other things. You're going to dance other dances. Just start to make.
And that's a word to give to all of the artists. Um, Daniel, this has been really great. I just have one last question for you.
Okay, I love it.
What is your, if there were no limitations? You know, sometimes they do it a three wishes question. I'm sure you've
I
heard of
love it.
that. But if you had one burning desire that you would like to do, no limitations in terms of time or money or place, what
Mhm.
would it be?
I am calling it down from the universe for real. Like, I'm in this dream, so I can tell you very easily. I'm currently in LA. I'm in California, and I want to build a thing out here that is it may or may not be a place that is a literal building. I don't know that that's it, but I want to build what I'm thinking of is like this community of makers and people who are healers and people who are living their lives with deep engagement, to be like a kind of think tank, like almost like a summer camp for grown folks where we can
That
come
sounds like
together.
fun.
It'll be so much fun.
Let me know. I'm coming.
You gonna be on the board of directors. But I feel it emerging, and it for me is gonna combine my teaching, combine my art making, and combine what I love, which is to be with people in ways that are just regular,
Yeah.
into the vision of what I think in the future. Because I think we need spaces to come together, to be with one another, and to let some stuff fall so we can get some deep breaths and then together leapfrog into that future,
Hmm.
because we know we can do it.
Well, I have, you know what? The one thing that I did skip over was your teaching in
Oh, okay.
academia. So just very
Uh-huh.
very
Very
quickly,
briefly,
and
yeah.
then we'll do a wrap up.
Great. Yeah, well, I am currently a professor of theater at Fordham University. I've taught, this will be it's my 13th year at Fordham, but my 20th year teaching. And I love teaching. I come from teachers. Like, everybody taught all the time. I was the kid that was the nerd. When I would get home from school, I would set up my little toys and stuffed animals, and I would teach them what I learned that day. You know, I would do all the things because I loved that act.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love working with students. I, like many people in the academy now, I think many people of color in the academy, I have serious issues with the institutions in terms of what is the relationship that we have to education and to students versus the relationship we have to the industry of an education. And that's where
I'm
my
laughing because now my
spirit.
neighbor is vacuuming, but
Oh,
there's
it's
no way
all
I can
good.
stop
No,
it.
it's all good. But maybe that was a sign from above to mind my words.
Well, we can go off mic and talk about
Okay,
things, but
I love it.
I think the thing is that with education now, and especially with the arts, is that we as artists and as educators as well have to be advocates for the arts in terms of, they have the STEM, right? So now they finally understood you have to put the A in for
Yes, right.
STEAM,
Theme.
and they've realized, especially in New York City, and LA, of course, as well, that the arts contributes heavily to the economy, and that we need a little more respect,
That's right.
right?
That's right. That's
We
right.
don't necessarily do things to make money, although it's nice when we do.
Ooh,
Um, but that creativity adds energy and flow to any community, whether it's a
yes.
small town in Virginia, where I
Mm-hmm.
think Petersburg, they were having a thing to get artists to come down and live in the city because many
Beautiful.
people were leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, where they have their own dance company and stuff, and the May Festival that's gone on for years, and that regional,
Yeah,
I think now we can have a little more emphasis on the regional
I hope
uh,
so.
as we come back.
Yeah.
But we're going to drift off in a minute. But let me just say this, Daniel, it has been wonderful speaking to you
Oh,
and to
you as
get to
well.
know you. And I hope that people who view this interview will pick up these pearls of wisdom that you have dropped about family, about community, about mentors, about creativity. You said, don't wait, just start.
Yeah.
And I think with that, we're going to end. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you
And
so much.
stay safe and stay well. Make sure you wear your mask.
Oh,
And we'll
yes.
talk soon.
All right. Thank you.